Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Community Infrastructure Services Committee meeting today on December 5th, 2016. Today's meeting will be separated into two parts. The first part dealing with item number 1, which is 2017 community grants. And we do have delegations here to speak, and just wanted to remind all delegations that pursuant to Council's procedural bylaw, delegations are permitted to address the committee for a maximum of 5 minutes. And I'm not sure if Ms. Cat, you guys are not going to do any presentation. Okay. With that, our first delegation up is Lisa O'Connell and Dr. Alan Filewad of Pat the Dog Theatre Creation.
Good morning. Well, shall I wait for the timer to begin? It's my first time we've come to grant to this.
No worries. I won't be difficult.
Thank you so much. I'm going to use it to keep myself right on time, hopefully, for you. Okay.
Go ahead.
My name is Lisa O'Connell. I'm the Artistic Director of Pat the Dog Theatre Creation. I'm joined today by our Board Chair, Dr. Alan Filewad. Alan is the former Chair of the Department of Drama at the University of Guelph. So there's the context of where we are. This is our first time in the Tier 1 program, and the first time we've been invited to talk about our grant and also to appeal. I'd like to thank the city staff who've worked with us for the invitation to be here and for helping us get there. Pat the Dog Theatre Creation, for those of you not aware, is a theatre incubator. We are a startup Mica Communitech for theatre. We're the only one in Ontario. We serve more than 700 theatre artists, all young generation. Those are people that come out of the theatre programs. They're professional, and they're under 30 years of age. We are curatorial. We look at terms of work in terms of the quality and artistic excellence of the work. We look towards dissemination locally for local stages, nationally and internationally. We provide the highest quality work and been awarded so. I'm here today because cultural industries represent 3% of our GDP. It is the work that we do as a creator that creates the content, that creates the work that goes out there at the 3% of the GDP. It is 635,000 jobs in Canada, and it is a business. This is a business. Art is a business. Respectfully, I would say that $4,040 awarded to our organization, which represents 1.8% of a budget, is bad business. It's bad cultural business, and it puts out a bad message to the young creators with which we work for. Let me give you some context. Pat the Dog Theatre Creation in the past 11 years, and I'd like to point out it was founded in Waterloo Region in 2006 by myself. It is a woman-led and a woman-funded theatre organization. We are one of only 26% in Canada that has been founded by a woman. This is significant to the national ecology, something we should be very proud of in this community. We have received back-to-back province-wide grants by the Ontario Trillium Foundation. Again, this is significant. We are the only mid-sized arts organization in Ontario's history to receive back-to-back province-wides. We've received an investment by Ontario Trillium of a little less than $500,000 over 6 years. We are currently in year 2, going into year 3 of our second province-wide. The province-wide program on Ontario Trillium is significant because that grant went to the Board of Directors of all of Ontario Trillium. It is the highest level of cultural, artistic leadership, if you will. Pat the Dog provides support and active programming to all levels of theatre creation and presentation in Kitchener-Waterloo. We have had work or supported people that have done work at all of your festivals. Every single thing that's ever been done in terms of art presentation in this community has had representation either through support of the artists or active programming by Pat the Dog. Why are we here? 1.8% of our budget going forward will not allow us to pay for the things that we pay for in Kitchener-Waterloo. Our rent is paid here. Our insurance is paid here, our bank fees are paid here, our bookkeeper is paid here, our auditor is paid here by BDO, our staff is paid here, and I point out we have one staff. We do all this incredibly lean. We do 2 key pieces of programming, the Text and Tech project, which is the only project on digital creation in theatre in all of Canada. We just recently did an event last Friday. Staff from the NAC came down, the National Arts Centre in Ottawa, on their nickel to come and observe our programming. And we currently stimulated this year the Women's Room, which is the first and only in the history of Kitchener-Waterloo women's playwriting unit. Given the fact that last year this community was rated the 25th worst place for women to live and work in Canada, it is a timely project, one we're very happy to stimulate, one that is being mentored and headed by a young generation woman, Nicole Smith, who's currently working in our office. I'd like to point out personally, Nicole is working 3 jobs right now, only one of which is Pat the dog, only one of which I can pay her 2 days a week. The number of $10,000 we're requesting reflects the amount that CEI gave us over 3 years ago. It was the only amount the CEI ever gave us. We need those dollars. Respectfully, we ask you to step up and join our national funders that provide most of our budget. We ask you to help us show leadership in our sector, and we ask you to join us and fund this initiative that has been recognized as a national leader in our country. Thank you very much, and I'm 17 seconds under.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. We do have some questions for you.
Absolutely.
From committee. Councillor Gazzola, just hold on. Okay.
Thank you. How much do you think you spend in Kitchener? You're looking for a grant equivalent to that amount. How much do you spend here?
Over 65% of our budget would be in Kitchener. As I pointed out, all of our infrastructure is here. We live here. We pay rent here, insurance, bank fees, our bookkeeper, our auditor, our key programming. So it would be at least 65 to 70% of our budget. And our total budget going into 16-17 is $225,000.
Yeah, I'm seeing here your budget's $324,000. So
We've adjusted. That was prior to our adjustments of where we're going forward. We've received some of our national grants already, so we've, as always, you take your operating budget and you adjust forward. We'll come in at 225.
So this isn't, the figures we have aren't your budget then. I was also going to ask you for actual figures for 2016. Your year end is June 30th, so.
We've just received them 2 weeks ago. I'm very happy to submit them to the city.
Your auditors are slow.
No, our auditors aren't slow, sir, with the lack of staff that we have. It's our infrastructure that can do it. We have one person doing all that work. We'd be faster if we had 2, sir. Yeah. And that's what we're asking for support. $10,000 would be 1/3 of Nicole Smith's. We're asking 1/3 from our local, 1/3 from our province, and 1/3 from the feds. And right now, the feds and the province are stepping up, I believe, where our local community should be.
You talk very much about the tech community. Have you received anything from the tech community? We
work very strongly in kind with the tech community. I'm very happy, and if you would like to look on our website, you'd see that I spoke at Geek Girls Waterloo Region just 6 months ago. There were 5 women-led tech organizations that spoke. I was the only one to speak as an arts leader. I represented the A in STEAM, not just STEM. We do a lot of work with that. And at this point, we are building those relationships, but certainly we have a great deal of support. The women-led tech initiatives have provided many letters of support for us in our grants nationally and provincially.
Do you get any financial support from the tech community?
We're beginning those relationships now. Money that we could receive from the City of Kitchener very much will help us in doing that advancement work in this local community. It is very difficult to make the argument for the business of what we do, lacking the leadership that I believe this council could show for us, and then thereby show the community.
I looked at your financial statements for 2014, 2015, and there's a substantial reduction in grants -other. What are those?
I'm sorry, sir?
There's a substantial reduction in grants from other. What are those and what happened there?
I believe that's incorrect, sir. We've actually had increases in all areas, so we have not had a substantial. You might be looking at our Trillium amounts, and they decline. In the first, what they do usually is in the first year they go up, and then because we're in our second province-wide, they begin to decline down. It's an investment by Ontario Trillium. They do not expect to be carrying us. It's a nod from that particular program to other communities that this should be an organization you should be looking at.
Yeah, I'm looking at your audited financial statements, and it said 2014 there was 124,000 in grants from other. In 2015, there was only 82. That's a substantial decline.
No. And again, sir, that represents that some of the Trillium money, because our year end is the 30th and the money is given in a calendar year, some of it was taken over to the next year. It's literally just the carryover of programming from the Trillium.
My final question is, do you get any support from the region and/or the cities of Cambridge and Waterloo?
We do get funding from the City of Waterloo. The City of Waterloo has always been a strong partner. And they have also given us in-kind support as well, in addition to cash support. We've been given for this 16-17 year $2,000 from Waterloo, but they're also looking at giving us in-kind potentially an office space. We do not apply to the City of Cambridge, as we do no program in the City of Cambridge. We used to apply to the region of Waterloo. We ceased doing that 3 years ago for this reason. We support many grants from young artists to the region of Waterloo, and we do not choose to be in competition with our grants for those particular young artists. It was a decision made by the board and staff that we would no longer apply to the region, thereby allowing those dollars to be for our young generation artists. One of the concerns we have in this community is that there isn't a lot of intake for the young generation artists to come in. They are competing with major organizations that require the funding. That's impossible for them to be able to find the funding that's necessary. So that was a decision made, and it's showing leadership in our sector.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you for coming in, and clearly your passion, Lisa, is pretty strong. Can you help me understand what this National Texan Tech Initiative is all about?
I'm very happy to. It's creation. So when we create a video game, when you create anything digitally that's going to be disseminated on our smartphones or our tablets, somebody has to write the story. Somebody who is a person that is trained in how to write story, that comes out of our programs, from the university programs, is the person that sits down and instigates the story that builds the world. Our project brings in the highest talented people from across the country to come and work with the creators in this community. And we're working with the Games Institute at the University of Waterloo. We're also working individually with startups that do digital game design. Our interest is access, so we're looking at having more women write those stories, more LGBTQ, more Indigenous. We want it to reflect, and we feel it's our job to make sure that the right people come to that story creation and have the opportunity to reflect those stories, thereby that we can get those stories out to all of the different faces of what contemporary Canadian audiences are.
Okay, thank you. So,
you're welcome.
What I'm understanding is that you're partnering with many of our startups. Would some of those startups be at 44 Gaukel?
Well, right now we're working with the Games Institute at the University of Waterloo. So we work with everyone in the community. So absolutely, if there was an opportunity there, yes. But at this point, we're not working with anyone at 44 Gaukel.
Okay. The reason I'm asking this question is because I feel that there's a slight duplication here. We've got startups that are doing all kinds of tech and arts and culture at 44 Gaukel. You are now asking for money to continue that programming related to the University of Waterloo. Have you gotten any funding from the university?
Respectfully, Councillor, there is no one else doing what we do. I appreciate your question, and again, I think it reflects the complexity of arts creation, and I share with you what you expressed in terms of trying to understand, and I really appreciate the question. Most people do not understand this. Creation, incubation is a sole It takes at least one organization to do that. We're the only one in the province that specifically looks at the creation of the work in terms of process-based dissemination. There's no one else in this community doing that. There's no one else in the province doing that. And in this Text and Tech project, we're the only one in the nation doing it.
Okay. Do you get any funding from the University of Waterloo?
We cannot get funding from the University of Waterloo. It will go past the MUSH rule. We do get in kind from them. We get in kind in terms of using the space, but we can receive no dollars from them. What we do hope to promote, and has happened, is that we bring people that are young generation creators who then get hired from the University of Waterloo. But personally, we would then be in conflict with what our mandate is. Okay. If we take money from them, then we're not doing the work we need to do, which is incubating the next generation of creators.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
That's all the questions we have, Ms. O'Connell.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Our next delegation up is David Marskel from the museum.
Good morning.
Welcome, David.
Sorry you have to start your week with snow and me. I'll try to make this as quick as possible. I wanted to thank you all for allowing me to come in today and just give a quick update on the museum and our request for some additional funding beyond the 1%. Oh, I get to do this. It's been a great year at the museum. We've hosted things from the Havana Dialogues, the top left up there, the Aging Dialogues, the first in the country, and the tour for the Terry Fox exhibit, which was amazing. Full-page editorials in the Toronto Star, 6 full-page ads in the Star on the top right. The Globe and Mail had an advertorial, as well as our STEM programming that we continue to build out. We're very, very proud of what we do. We opened the Underground studio a couple of Sundays ago. It was a response to the community, having outgrown the nights for some of our STEM and STEAM-related programs. You can see the mayor there in the opening as we were taking through some soldering courses. And also what we're proud of is just in the last week alone, we opened our doors for hundreds of less fortunate people for dinner at the Bee restaurant, and then through our exhibits, which if you haven't been, it's a wonderful experience, and it's hundreds of people who don't get a chance, and it might be the only gift they get this year. And we concluded the week with Sounds of the Season, the CBC show, which broadcast from the museum. We continue to work with a number of partners around the STEM programming, and the Underground Studio specifically has allowed us to build a collaboration, and we're working with the Kitchener Public Library, which is wonderful, and I look forward to what will come from that relationship. By the numbers, we continue to grow. Our attendance is almost 40% over 3 years. We're inching up to that 100,000 mark. We have 7 teachers on staff. We employ 43 people, but at the same time, our payroll is $70,000 less than it was 5 years ago, so we're acting efficiently as we can. Looking forward to Canada and Confederation's 150th. We're working with an Indigenous curator to bring on a new show that will talk about their 150 years, past 150 years. We're also looking at Canada through the filter of the Carnival in the Midway. As we started to look into it, it's an interesting mirror, how it has mirrored Canada. And we continue to be a stage for local artists. There's not a day in the calendar that we don't have local artists represented. Currently, there's from the Kitchener Collegiate, there's a photography exhibition, and in January we'll be opening Ex Novation, led by a number of artists from Kitchener. And we're looking forward to building out this banner. I need to raise, I'll be trying to figure out how to raise $9,000 to have a building wrap to really bring a spotlight to downtown Kitchener for this next year. I won't take you through this, but you've met Frank Boutsis, who addressed you last on behalf of the museum. It's a strategic board. It's a stellar board of business people and creative people across the community, and we do build things in a strategic manner. We continue to attempt to inch towards sustainability. We are not eligible for provincial or federal operating funding because we do not have a collection. So we receive about 25% of the funding from the municipal governments, meaning we have to generate north of 75% each and every year. We're executing the board's strategies. We're strategically selecting our exhibitions. We have just worked with, our strategies have aligned with the University of Waterloo and the Institute for Quantum Computing, and we have the quantum exhibit. There's a number of other things there in the interest of time that you can see that we're working towards the federal government and so on, and we hope to work with you to close the gap. Each year, we receive $120,000 from the City of Kitchener. 0 from operating, the 120 is from the per capita. The city controls a maintenance budget of about $90,000. The staff report shows our request for $30,000 as an increase, as we've received 0 increase over the last 7 years, and in this budget, a 1% increase. Alternatively, One way you may close this gap is to consider allowing the excess of the maintenance budget to be given to us on an annual basis as a cash grant. Thank you.
Thank you, David. We do have we have some questions for you. Councillor Fernandez.
Thanks, David. I appreciate your email this weekend, as well as when you said we are inching towards sustainability. That's always been sort of my questions geared toward that. Can you, because I know I wasn't a big supporter of the makerspace, can you help me understand how that's coming along?
It's coming along extremely well. We opened 2 weeks ago. We've had over 700 students through it already, and through the general public as well. It opened, the first test run was 190 Girl Guides and Brownies. We had a sleepover, and they, through that night, created some things there. It was wonderful. We've taken the $50,000 project grant that you gave us, and we've leveraged that to $500,000. Which is wonderful. So we can build it out, which we have, and we can guarantee robust programming for the next 3 years, and we will continue to leverage that. This community was a response to this community, and it's allowed us to work with the public library in a way that we hadn't before. I had met with Mary several times. We've looked at different things, but this is a real catalyst for true collaboration and to build that corridor, if you will, between the two of us. So it's a huge success, and it would be wonderful if you could come and visit sometime and see the children learning there.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you. You talked about the maintenance budget, and this is something that I'm curious, and I'd like to delve in a little bit deeper with our staff once all of our delegations are done. You're saying that you don't always use up your entire maintenance budget. Can you give us a sense of how many times in the last 3 years that you haven't used up your entire maintenance budget?
Every year. Every year that I've been here in 10 years. And let me say from the beginning, the staff are responsive and we work well with the staff, but the staff does control the budget. If we have an obvious broken pipe or something, they respond to that and place a work order through your systems. We have priorities that haven't always met the same priorities as the city staff. And for example, we'd like to build out a bathroom on each floor a year, for example, because the building has been open for 13 years. But there is an excess that goes back wherever it goes back each and every year that ranges from, I might be misleading a little bit, but at least $20,000 to maybe $30,000 on an annual basis. Okay.
And what I want to understand from staff is that going back to the bottom line in terms of all of the funding for maintenance across the city, or is it set aside for a reserve in case you guys need something bigger to be repaired? So in case of, I don't know what your heating system is, if it's a boiler or a furnace or something like that, or HVAC unit. Okay, thank you very much for coming in, David.
Thank you.
Councillor Gazzola.
Tell me the truth, did the mayor pass the soldering test?
I'm sorry?
Did the mayor pass the soldering test?
He made himself a snowman that blinks. So yes.
I was looking at your statements, 2015 and 2016, and I noticed there was some grants there from the federal and provincial governments, but in 2016 the province cut from 80,000 down to 3,000. What was the story there?
So just we're not eligible for operating grants. From time to time, we are successful in securing project-based grants. Many of the project-based grants, and the one you're referring to with the province, were only eligible every 2 years. So that was sort of a spike, if you will, in the 1 year, and it dropped back last year. Next year, we will apply again to that fund.
Yeah, I was looking at going over your budget and trying to compare it to actuals. And the first part of it deals with exhibits and facilities. In that section, the revenue remains fairly constant, but yet your expenses increased by 27%. What is projected there? And as a result, you have a substantial loss on exhibits. What's happening there?
I'm sorry, I didn't prepare or bring those with me today. I believe that is some of the infrastructure that we built out into the museum, things that we would invest in that would be new exhibits, permanent exhibits. For example, we invested $40,000 in that year to upgrade the tot spot to make it a snoozle room for young kids and kids that are dealing with autism. So that's something that our expense line would have gone up, but the revenue line may have stayed the same.
Okay. Under are there other grants and donations? It's increasing from $315,000 to almost $700,000. What are you expecting there? Who is that coming from?
This is incoming grants you're talking about?
Yes, it says other grants / donations.
Again, it's in any given year we've invested into our advancement area, and we're trying to build out the funding avenues for us. For example, with this year we've worked with the University of Waterloo. We've reduced our costs to create an exhibit on quantum, and at the same time we've increased monies for marketing. I believe it was $150,000 there, plus $80,000 from a provincial grant. And so we're always, that line can always fluctuate as we seek to raise the revenues, which, as you know, we try to be entrepreneurial and lean as we try to generate over 70% of our budget.
I'd like to just look at your attendance and participation in our community. I saw your figures are around 91,000 a year, getting close to 100,000. Do you have any idea what the participation are for other similar type organizations like the Art Gallery, the Homer Watson Foundation, and the Symphony? How does your attendance compare to those?
I'm not sure that there's an organization, the Grand Alliance of those types of organization that meets on a regular basis. Shirley Medill is here today. We are compiling that information just for the purpose of making sure that people like yourself are aware of what we do. I would suspect that the Symphony is a similar number to ours, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Thank you. I have a question of staff at the appropriate time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. Hi, David. Thank you for coming in and for advocating so strongly on behalf of the museum. You do a terrific job of marketing the museum and of making great exhibits that are interesting and inviting. I know that the city has always recognized that you do provide an excellent contribution to our community, and we're happy about that. I just want to ask you, the difference that you're asking for here is $30,000 or so. What would be the difference if you were to receive a partial increase or the full increase that you're asking for? How would that impact the organization?
Well, every year the museum comes up short around $220,000, $230,000. The interest from the restricted fund has covered that. This year, it's been a perfect storm. The markets are down, and so we're eroding the capital, and that's very concerning in terms of how much life we have left. The light rapid transit construction, I'm a huge fan of the light rapid transit. It's absolutely affected our revenues and our attendance this year. So it's been a perfect storm. What the board is doing is looking at that delta of about $230,000, $250,000 and breaking it into pots. If we were successful in receiving this $30,000, that's just over 10%, and we would be looking for 4 or 5 more pots to do that because we want to get to sustainability. We're on our feet swinging and doing the best we can. We're bringing huge numbers of people from out of town in terms of percentage that support economic, positive economic impact. The school groups are growing, and so all I can tell you, if we don't receive the additional funding, it'll be a lot harder, and our lifespan will be a lot shorter.
Okay. And have you explored other avenues for increasing your revenues?
Yeah, I mean, I think Councillor Gazzola was talking about some of the grants. We've actually invested in our advancement area, and we have an extra person. We have 3 full-time people now that are working that, very specifically on individual giving, one on corporate giving, and one around grants and so on. We've been very, very successful, as Councillor Fernandez asked, around the makerspace. That goes right to one of our core strategies of diversifying our revenue and monetizing our creativity, and that has allowed us to leverage what you've given us to 10 times, tenfold, to almost $500,000, $490,000.
Okay, and what did I wanted to also just ask you, if you were to, I lost my train of thought. I had one more question, but you know what? I will have a question of staff at the appropriate time. And if I think of it, I'll ask you offline. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Chair Ioannidis. David, I just want to take a moment to add in the acknowledgement that Councillor Marsh has made of your great effort to helping to build a vibrant community. It's very easy to see the the increase in, I guess, people coming to downtown that the museum plays.
Thank you.
Is a tremendous benefit to this community. You mentioned obviously certain footfalls because of the LRT construction and just the conditions of the market. Related to the LRT, as for attendees, what was the difference between, say, 2014 prior to construction start? Or
I'm going back by memory. We were off. I mean, in terms of dollars, I believe we were off about $6,000-7,000. Going back to March, it's affected us, but our budget starting, our fiscal begins July 1st. We were off about $6,000-7,000 July, August, September. We saw an increase year over year in October and November, a slight increase. Now we had reduced our targets and we've increased our marketing significantly with Quantum. So we're seeing a little light at the end of the tunnel and at the light at the end of King Street as it goes under Victoria.
Okay, well, we're all hoping that goes well. This community and, of course, this council is strong, supporters of our tech community, and through Communitech, we've shown that through assistance, and I think that's acknowledged by the tech community as well. And we're fortunate that some of the companies are flourishing and starting to do well and monetizing. How well of a advocacy do you try to reach out to the tech community to go for private dollars?
We have a significant number of partners. Some are in kind. The Underground Studio began through a STEM week of programming, and there was 7 or 8 community tech companies that would donate a week of their time and staff's time to help enlighten, I think it was grade 6, and that we've done for 3 or 4 years. Christie Digital is a huge ongoing supporter of the museum and have been since for the 10 years I've been here. We work with the Accelerator Center in terms of revenue generation. We have in the past supplied their social media, and we're working with the Institute for Quantum Computing and a number of other groups. We are also planning for the first quarter of 2018 a fairly significant show, which we've applied for almost $400,000 from the federal government on a new media show that would bring in, and Christie is supporting this, and it would allow us to work much more closely with a number of other tech companies.
So obviously it's clearly understood that the City of Kitchener is responsible for the outside shell while you guys take care of the inside of the museum. How much control do you have of that space? Are you able to lease or subdivide some space to generate some extra revenue? Is that even available to you?
We certainly do with the front of house and the restaurant food service. We need food service. We're not good at that, so the best model is what we have currently. We have a terrific partner there. In the past, we did sublet the Underground Studio with the awareness of the council. I'm going back to 6-7 years to Mad Science. It wasn't the best scenario for a number of reasons, and noise levels and access when we were closed and so on. So we feel our best revenue generation is through our exhibits, through our rental income, which is growing quite quickly, weddings and that type of thing. We have Christmas parties, several each week at this time of year.
Is there opportunity to grow that further?
Yeah, the highs are very high for the museum when we've got this tin can of sustainability tagged to our ankle. Our attendance has grown over 40% in the last 3 years. We're hitting capacity of the building, and we have to think about our future in that way. So yes, we can put more rentals in, but as a result, we could not open until noon on Saturday and Sunday for the last 2 weeks because we had a private Christmas party, coincidentally from a couple of tech companies. So, we have to balance off our members and their needs and not frustrate them, but generate the revenue to keep going. And that's what we do, and I think we're relatively successful and strategic.
My time's almost out. The 30,000 increase that you guys are requesting, approximate, what if that was phased over 2 years?
I mean, it's the same answer to Councillor Marsh. I mean, we're trying to close a significant gap without interest because of the markets, and that's eroding our base, and that's a downward spiral. If we receive the 30,000, it'll help us get to where we're trying to get, where all of us are trying to get, then half of that amount.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Councillor Yaneski.
Yeah, thank you for coming in, Mr. Marscale, and making a presentation. I did read email that you sent over the weekend. Appreciate it, and your comments on that, requesting the additional funding. What I'm just trying to also understand is you're here asking for another 13.8% increase here at Kitchener. Are you also approaching City of Waterloo and the region and Cambridge for increases as well in a similar amount, percentage?
We are. We talk to them in different ways. The City of Waterloo acknowledges an issue of inequity, and so they are attempting to ramp us up. The last increase was of 10%. The City of Cambridge, we're fortunate to get what we get there. It's several $1,000s, and we appreciate it. We do have school buses rolling from Cambridge to come here. The region, while we haven't had an increase in 7 years there, we have going to council very soon is an increase that would equal about $7,000, I think, in our case. That would help us. But we work with them all. We work with them directly and at the council level, trying to cheerlead and show the things that we're doing and show that we're being strategic as well and how we're trying to manage things to get to sustainability.
Appreciate your answer. So the money that we provide you in terms of the capital, cash and grant, etc., really is money that comes from our taxpayer. I mean, that's where our source of funding is, and so we just pass on an X percentage on to you and KW Symphony and anybody else who's asking for money as well. The region, when they give you funding, also get their money from the taxpayer as well. And they also contribute money to different sources as well. Isn't this money that's coming from the city and a taxpayer coming from the left pocket from Kitchener and the right pocket from a taxpayer from the region, that the taxpayer is sort of contributing twice? Is that the way I would see it, or am I wrong?
If you're advocating for amalgamation, I don't want to answer the question. No, I mean, the thing is, what we're giving back, we've leveraged the $50,000 to $500,000 for the underground studio, but what we're giving back is the thousands of tourists, the day trips, the overnight stays that are coming from Toronto, the El Postal Codes, the west of Toronto, London, and around us, and that are spending money in the businesses that are paying taxes back. You are investing in awe, inspiring, and enlightening the students that come, almost 10,000 students that come to the museum. That's what you're getting back. That's what the taxpayers are getting back. As a taxpayer, that's a pretty good deal, I would say.
Okay, interesting answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Yaneski. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Ioannidis. David, thank you so much for coming in. You mentioned in your answer to Councillor Yaneski's question that Waterloo has increased their support by 10%. Are they looking to keep those annual increases or increase their support incrementally annually as well?
I have a meeting coming up with them in a couple of weeks, and I understand that their budget is set for several years, so it will be in context of that. But the conversations we've had is that they do want to ramp it up and catch us up somewhat to what others are receiving.
Okay, and just getting back to the maintenance budget, the surplus in there. So you're asking for just the ability to work with that excess and use it where it would be best suited.
Yeah, the staff, I'm sure you'll be asking similar questions. I believe there's a capital budget somewhere as well, but the maintenance budget, as I say, the staff have been helpful to us, and we work with them, and we bring ideas to them or urgent things that are broken. I think collectively we filter that through safety and environmental issues. Together we're trying to change all the light bulbs. It's a significant amount of money, but it would save us 8% in energy. And our energy bill goes up about $10,000 a year. You've heard that before, I'm sure. So that amount of money, which in one year might be $23,000 and a different year might be $34,000 if you allowed us to have this as a cash grant annually, it would go to our general operations. We may choose to use it in part for some maintenance things that the staff didn't deem to be a priority, but we would use it as we needed to.
Okay, thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schneider. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Thanks for coming in, Mr. Marscal. I'd echo my fellow councillors' comments on the contributions that the museum has made. I just wanted to, before we get into the questions of staff later on, I wanted to make sure that we're all clear on the expectations of facility maintenance grants. So according to the report, and I'll clarify this with staff afterwards, but it looks as though that any excess funds from that go into an account for larger capital improvements for the museum specifically. So, and as you mentioned, the lighting one, and actually that's the example used in the report, it looks like, if I'm reading it correctly, there's an accumulated balance of $85,000 in there, $75,000 of which would potentially come out for that lighting grant. So I just want to be clear on the request, and I want to make sure that we're understanding each other. If the funding does come from that maintenance budget, the surplus, that could potentially impact future capital works that you want to do at the museum, and you're comfortable with that as a request.
Yeah, I don't fully understand if there's a separate capital budget. I believe there is, and I don't know if money's been going into that every year. There must be hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting there. It says, again, I'm assuming it's specific for the museum's structure, but it says there's $85,000 in the account over, I guess, recent years, and it does say that there was $27,000 in 2016. So I just wanted to be clear on that point, that, and we'll clarify that with staff. I just wanted, before you sat down, I wanted to make sure that you knew that if we dig into that amount somehow, it could lessen the impact for you to apply for grants or the capital side and the city side. So I wanted to be clear on that point and want to make sure that you understood that. I hear you. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Davey. Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. I thought of my question. Have you ever considered what the in-kind grant or in-kind amount would be if you had calculated what rent would have cost if you had to pay rent to the city to that for the use of that space?
Sorry, what the question is?
You don't pay rent to the city-owned building.
No, it's
and I'm just wondering
building.
if you've ever used that as a calculation in your in-kind revenue.
No.
Okay. Do you think that there might be a benefit to that, to show that if you did have to pay rent, that your costs would be quite a bit larger?
Yeah, and I think that's something that happens pretty well in every cultural organization. Clay and Glass, the city owns the building. Dune, the region owns the building. I mean, I think that's a common practice.
It's common. It's not everywhere. I think that you do have a benefit that some organizations certainly do not. They have to pay rent even. So I just thought that it might be of benefit even to you to show the actual, budget of the museum would be higher.
I see. Mm-hmm. I see what you're saying.
Anyway, I just want to put that out there, that, that's an additional thing. And, after questions of staff, I'll have a motion to bring forward at the appropriate time.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Marsh. Councillor Singh?
Yeah, actually, a quick question of staff.
What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through all the delegations.
Yeah.
And then go through questions of staff. You
No
can
problem.
ask on whatever item, and then if there's any motions and all that, we'll go through all that.
Of course, thank you.
Okay, we have no further questions. Thank you, David.
Thank you all very much.
Our next delegation is members of the Social Development Center of Waterloo Region.
Well, good morning.
Welcome, gentlemen.
I think we had a presentation. I'm not
We
sure.
do have a
Okay.
slide deck that should be up there. Excellent.
Thank you.
Well, good morning, Chair Ioannidis and members of committee. Thank you so much for welcoming us here today to chat about our community grant application appeal for 2017. My name is Devin Seville. I am a human rights lawyer and honored to be the president of the board of directors of the Social Development Center. And this is Nathan Pike, our impeccably dressed secretary. And again, we're pleased to be here this morning. So I'll get you to move along. We recognize that our time is short, so I'm going to try and be as brief as we can, subject to technical difficulties. So we want to begin with an appreciation and a reality check. The Social Development Center is and has been a proud and trusted partner with the City of Kitchener for more than 40 years. We continue to appreciate the city's ongoing support of our partnership with the Festival of Neighborhoods, and we view this support as a recognition of the importance of a strong and community-driven independent social development organization.
The 2017 recommendation is for $10,937, which is a 74% reduction from 2016, and we're here to talk about why we feel there's an investment that can be made by the city back to the 2016 levels or even back to the 2015 levels.
So I want to be really clear and brief because I know we all are victims of information overload. What are we asking you to do this morning? We're asking that this committee support our proposal and in particular return funding to its 2015 levels, or in the alternative, retain funding at the 2016 levels. Now, I think it's important to note that our total investment target, and again, I want to be very clear, the total investment target over time for the Social Development Center of our total sources of funding would be $100,000. We are not asking for that at this time.
So our 2017 proposal, which hopefully everybody's had a chance to read, it was in the report that you've received. It was outlined again in this presentation, which was provided before. But it aligns with the city's neighborhood strategy. And a lot of the work that our organization has done, I've been on the board for 11 years as a volunteer. Most of the work our organization does is behind the scenes, and it's in partnership with the city and with a whole bunch of people around our community. So it's a little bit more difficult to see, but it does align with what the neighborhood strategy is for the city. Okay, fieldwork.
So we wanted to talk a little bit about our fieldwork. So there have been questions in the past in terms of the outputs from the Social Development Center, and we've tried to summarize some of the main ones here. So we engage in citizen forums that we know are well received, and we know that members of council have often been participants in those citizen forums and very much enjoyed them, and we enjoy having you. We also engage in social policy analysis on a variety of issues, and currently we are tracking our Decent Lives and Strong Neighborhood initiatives as major outputs.
Prior to 2010, the city invested in both the Community Information Service and a broad scope. So we had support from the city to launch new agencies, research community needs, and we led initiatives that benefited the city. And partnership role in support of Festival Neighborhoods and Community Information Service and Development is what we've been able to do with the city funding since that point in time. Because core funding is not in the current budget that we're receiving from the city at this point in time.
Great. So
I'll give you a little extra time, gentlemen.
thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate that. So we want to talk about the city's support of the SDC as a partner for Festival of Neighborhoods. We think that this is a really important role that we are able to play. Tangible support for neighborhood outreach and engagement, things like vertical neighborhoods and online mapping tools. Our role also provides material support, including logistics, to empower communities, and in particular youth, to get involved in their community. And as an example of that, I want to point out the activity trunk that we currently staff and operate. And then I think the other big piece that we want to bring to your attention is the in-kind staffing for the Festival of Neighborhoods that the Social Development Center has been proud and privileged to provide. So there's a sort of separate role, and that is the Social Development Center as the Festival of Neighborhoods coordinator, which is distinctly separate. The SDC's role as a Festival of Neighborhoods coordinator provides what we believe to be a tangible benefit in terms of community involvement with tangible results.
One common misconception is that when the funding was moved from the region to Cambridge for the Community Information Database, that our Community Information Center was also moved. That's not the case. They're separate entities, and we still provide the Community Information Center, which has staffing and telephone information service, creation of information resources, development of web resources, and identifying emerging information needs. So that is separate, and it's not something that this organization has stopped providing to the city.
So what does that mean? Well, the desired outcomes, and there's certainly outcomes that we believe we're meeting, are that people are better informed and engaged. Those that we interact with have a better sense of community, and from there are able to fully participate in their civic and political life of the city of Kitchener, often in ways that they wouldn't ordinarily be able to do in our submission.
These are some of the positive service outcomes. You've seen these numbers. We understand that we need metrics to quantify what the organization's doing and the amount of contacts that we have. Kitchener residents make up 60-70% of the participants against all activity areas. The majority of our work at this point in time is done to support communities and citizens in Kitchener.
So the message that I want to bring to you today is simply this, that tangible cuts in funding will affect tangible cuts in service. We are privileged and proud to be able to provide the service that we have been with a really skeletal set of resources and staff, which is unfortunate. And we believe that, you know, a continued cut to our funding would essentially leave us with less flexibility, which in the context of social development is actually interior to the goal, when the goal is flexibility and inclusion for all. And also, in a practical sense, it would lead us to consider other revenue models, including fee-for-service, which we submit is actually anterior to the general social development agenda and lens through which we operate.
I think at this point, just in light of time, and thank you for your patience as we've gone through, we'll just go to the sum.
Sure. So what I want to say to you is that our proposal provides specific focus on Kitchener neighborhoods. You've seen it on the slide. It achieves SDC priorities, which we view in many respects, particularly in the context of the neighborhood strategy, are synergistic with those of the city of Kitchener. In light of that, we think that this augments directions of the City of Kitchener neighborhood strategy and leverages our knowledge, which has been built over 40 years in terms of community planning, and thereby is an excellent value for taxpayers' money. So thank you.
Okay. Thanks, gentlemen. Councillor Davey?
Yes, thank you. Actually, before we get into questions, actually, I do recall there being some very specific direction from this council last year. So I'd look to you, Mr. Chair, or perhaps the clerk, to clarify our options in this matter.
Okay, yeah, because this is asking to reconsider a decision we made, so I want to make sure. The clerk, can you comment on this, please?
Yes, through the chair. A motion to reconsider would be needed to restore any previous funding, as Council last year previously voted to eliminate the grant after 2016. And given the current attendance, it would require 7 members to vote in approval, because it's 2/3 of members present.
Okay, so I will accept that. I think we're going to need to have a motion for reconsider. I'm not sure if anyone's... Okay, Councillor Marsh, you're going to put that up there? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, gentlemen, the motion to reconsider is did not pass.
So can I raise a point of information?
Pardon me?
So we understood that this would be a new application assessed on its merits.
No, this is pardon me? This is tier 1. This is a tier 1. There's a new application for you in tier 1 with, is that how it is?
So our understanding is that this is a new tier 1 application for the 2017 term, and so thereby it would be assessed by this committee and then council on its merits for the 2017 term. So the consequence of that may be that there be a reconsideration, but it's in the context of this proposal, which is a new proposal.
Okay, that's not the understanding of this committee. This committee is considering this as a reconsideration of previous funding.
Okay.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
No? There's no questions. Okay. Is that what you're going to ask questions? Yes. Okay, well, there is no questions. Okay, up next, if you get, everyone wants, the committee wants to click in for questions to staff. Go right ahead, please. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I'm not sure, Mr. Chair, if you want to deal with them in order. My questions were on the museum. Is that okay?
Yeah, no, go ahead. They'll be for all.
Thank you. So my question, I touched upon it with Mr. Marskell in his presentation. First question is, the excess funds that for the maintenance, do they go into a dedicated fund specifically for the museum building?
Whoops. Did I not click in? Okay.
Through the chair, from that $89,874, $27,710 go into a capital maintenance account, and that's used to fund capital requirements. So the city is required for all maintenance related to life safety systems inspections, HVAC system maintenance, roof inspections, buffing, recoating hardwood floors, cleaning and building facade, and maintaining doors and elevators. So
Mr. Eden, my question though is it in a separate account, or is it for just the museum structure, or is it in a general capital account for like buildings across the city?
It's in an account just for the museum.
Just the museum, okay. And the current, I'm not sure if this is the correct number or not, but the one in the report is there's a current balance of $85,000?
That's correct.
Okay, so I guess my other question then would be, if there's $27,000 that came out just in 2016, that $85,000 figure seems light. Do you know if there's been transfers out of that account over the years for expenses other than museum related?
Through the chair, there has not been transfers out that I'm aware of. I know there was a large roof replacement in 2008 related to some mechanical work on the roof that was about $180,000. There's ongoing maintenance. There's a $75,000 Canada 150 partnership request that the city would be responsible for $75,000. There's a new walkway and railing that's required to access the elevator mechanical, which is estimated at about $15,000 to $20,000. And there's a request from the museum for a new motorized awning and retrofit of some of the washrooms that currently isn't prioritized.
Okay. That's I'm a little confused then, because I guess the inference was that there's a surplus of 20-something thousand over several years, but if 30,000 of the 85 came into the account this most recent year, it would seem like there really isn't that much of a surplus ongoing.
Mr. Chapman?
So to clarify that point, Mr. Reedman is correct that there is an allocation into capital out of their grant budget, but that allocation has been fixed. And so there has been within operating a small surplus annually. That amount last year was around $12,000. This year it will be less than that amount. At its peak in recent history, it was around $20,000, but as the building ages, we expect that number would be lower. So I think Council has three options here. One is to carry on the current practice where that small surplus or deficit is closed out to operating. Another one would be to accept the request of the delegation. The third would be to give direction that any surplus would go into the capital account to address the capital issues that Mr. Reedman has just referenced.
And sorry, in the surplus, do we have an estimate in the ongoing future surplus from that?
No, only to say it's been declining in recent years. And so our expectation is as the building ages, that number will become smaller and not larger.
And does that funding increase by an inflationary amount typically in budget?
The in-kind funding for the museum?
Yes.
I believe it's been increased per the guideline. We'd have to go back and take a look.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'll park that for now. I know some of the other council colleagues have indicated motions, so I'll wait for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Councillor Fernandez.
So the money from the CEI, I think it was about $40,000. That has not been allocated yet, has it?
Mr. May?
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, it is not. There's an issue paper, I believe, in the operating budget recommending that funding at about $44,000 be transferred to Tier 2.
Okay.
But that decision has not been made.
Okay, that's good to know. Because that's one where I'm heading. I'd like to see if we can pull out about $10,000 of that and move that towards the museum. Because what I'm hearing from Mr. Chapman and Mr. Reedman is that the maintenance funding would not be a good area to pull money out of. Is that correct?
Mr. Reedman?
Staff would not recommend taking money from the maintenance account.
Okay, I mean, that's your recommendation, but if it's year over year, there's leftover money, I mean, I'd rather use that than taking from the CEI unallocated funding yet. So if we were to take $10,000 from the maintenance, how many years have we had leftover money in the maintenance fund?
Mr. Chapman?
Through the chair, my understanding is that the direction has been given not to overspend that account, and so we'd basically do maintenance work up to the limit of the budget. Again, all I would suggest is that you heard from Mr. Marskell and Mr. Reedman that the list of capital requirements has outpaced the funding. And so at this point in time, we've been closing out a surplus to operating because we have no other direction from council. We would strongly recommend, if it's your direction, that you move any surplus in operating into the capital account because, as you've heard from both people today, the list is far greater than the funding available.
Okay, so instead of moving it to additional funding, we would move it from the maintenance into capital because of the larger capital projects that are needed to be done.
That's correct.
Okay, all right. Okay, then I'm still going to work on that concept of the $10,000 from CEI moving into the museum. I have to make a comment about the inequity of the people from the Social Development Council not being able to answer questions. I think it's unfair.
Councillor Fernandez.
I think it's.
Councillor Fernandez.
I'm not going to stop. I think they have taken the time to be here, and it's completely unfair and disrespectful that they're talking.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, the first point I want to clarify, I look upon this process as part of the budget process, and during the budget process, we are not allowed to make any resolutions or recommendations, so I would gather that's the same rule for this process today. There'll be no recommendations coming out of here.
It's subject to this committee right now. Like, if
no, I thought you. I totally disagree with that principle because I've always pushed for making a recommendation so that the public know where we're going and it would be ratified at the final meeting. But this council seems to have adopted that policy, so we have to play with the policy.
The way I see it is that's the reason why we don't do those now, because we have these issues coming up today.
Well, this is all part of the process, so you can't suck and blow. Engineering principle.
All right. Okay.
Okay. My question was, and it does somewhat relate to the museum. I would like to know if staff, and I don't need it today because I don't think we're going to deal with it today. I would like to know from staff what percentage our other grants have gone up in the 7-year interim period that we're talking about as far as the museum is concerned. Has there been have we increased by whatever percent? So I would like to know that by budget day when we deal with this issue.
Mr. Miller, you can address that now.
We actually do have that number handy. So the cumulative and compounded number since from 2011 through this year is 9.89%.
Okay, Councillor Singh. Thank you, Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, carrying on with that last question on the increase, does that take into account the increases to Center in the Square?
Mr. Wilmer?
Through the chair, no. This is really just what did the other Tier 1 groups get from City Council over the last from 2011 through 17 projected.
It's more of a comment. I think it's really for transparency. We should start showing Center in the Square as part of our Tier 1 grant. Looking at the museum, I see no difference. We own the building. There's a different organization, separate board that takes care of inside the operations, similar to what happens there. And it really would show the amount of investment that this council and this community has been investing into our arts and culture community altogether. When you separate it out, it gives an equitable picture, when in fact it's quite different. I'm glad Councillor Davey touched on the questions for the maintenance grant. It's clear to see that the capital fund has already been, would be soon depleted if Canada 150 grant were to be successful. So I think that would be short-sighted for us to redirect those monies, any surpluses coming from the maintenance grants. And that's the only avenue we really have to replenish that capital. And I think that's improvements to the museum. In the ultimate end, it goes to benefit the museum. So it's not that it's going back into the tax base. Now, just a question on the grant for Canada 150. Does the museum pay for the hydro, or is that part of the taken out of the maintenance portion of it?
David?
The museum pays 100% of the hydro energy.
Okay. Well, I was hoping that if it were coming from us, the maintenance, if they were successful, obviously there would be some electrical savings, assuming that it's LED conversion as well, and some of those savings could hopefully go towards their future funding models. So really, again, I had keyed into more in-depth questions on the capital and the maintenance, and Councillor Davey has already done that, but thank you for allowing me to make that quick comment of mine as well. I'll wait to see what Councillor Marsh has in mind.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Singh. Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Chair Ioannidis. So when I was looking at the fact that the museum, along with the other key cultural organizations that we have funded out of a separate fund prior to this year, including the Symphony and the Kidaboo Art Gallery, those grants have been stagnant for 6 years, going on 7, pending 2017 dollars. And so I want to put forward a motion that the former arts sustainability funding, which is now going into Tier 1 grants for the museum, the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony, and Kidaboo Art Gallery, be increased by the amount of the increase that other Tier 1 arts groups received during that period from 2011 to 2017. And that amount is close to 10%. It's 9.89%. I have it here for the clerk if you want to put it on the screen.
Yes, can you please put that up?
And also, I wouldn't want to see the amount that if this motion were to pass, I wouldn't want to see the amount just take away from Tier 2 funding amount. I would like to see this come from a different pot, perhaps from our increase in tax assessment that's pending. But that's up for debate. I just want to put this forward. So the amount, the total amount would be close to about $20,000, close to $12,000 for the museum and close to $4,000 for each of the other two organizations.
Renata?
Through the chair, the arts and culture funding was from 2010 to 2016. I'm not sure if that would change the figures up there. 2017 is when we merged it into Tier 1, where they did receive the increase that we're recommending, similar to other groups. So my understanding is the funding was 2010 to 2016.
Yeah, and so that's the same as my understanding. As thank you, Renata. Just so, starting in 2010, the amounts were $120,000 and then $40,000 for the other organizations, and so the potential increase would have been for 2011 and on. If they had been actually funded under Tier 2.
Okay, just point of clarification. So in part of your motion, you're asking to increase their budget by $131,000. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing this echoing here.
Okay, maybe it's my microphone. So what I'm suggesting is that if these three organizations had been funded under Tier 1, that their budget would have increased by, and I found that I asked staff for help with finding the Tier 1 increases on an annual basis. So we had in 2011 2% increase, and 2012 2% increase, and so on. And so, and this year, as you know, it's 1% increase. And so if we combined all of those, it would total 9.89% increase. So this is essentially, I'm suggesting that we play catch up for all these. Is that clear?
But that's, if we're playing catch up, we're requesting for $131,000 then.
If we're playing catch up, instead of $120,000, we're asking for $131,000. So it would just be an increase of $11,868.
Oh, I see. Okay. Oops. Councillor Galloway-Seelock?
Yeah, I just have a question of clarification with regards to the assumption that the museum, the symphony, and the art gallery didn't get any increases when we actually went to the CEI funding. Was there not an increase that was given to them at that point that could equate to this amount?
Mr. Wilmer?
I'm not sure if I understand the question correctly, but when the sustainability funding was first granted in 2010, the amounts were 120, 40, and 40, and those amounts were never changed in the subsequent years.
What was their funding pre-sustainability funding, I guess is my question.
For the museum, I don't think there was any operating funding. The 120 is our only cash grant to the museum.
So we gave them zero funding prior to, so they got $120,000 in 2010 that they weren't receiving before.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, and do you know what the symphony and the art gallery?
Not offhand, I don't.
Okay, because the art, okay,
Okay.
Clarification, I can key in for the rest of my.
Okay. Have you keyed in Councillor Fernandez?
Okay. I'd like to understand, if I can, about the 23% increase to the Kitchener Blues Festival. I'm looking at all of the other organizations, and none of them are reaching that percentage. Do we have to support that?
Through the chair, that was approved by council last year. The Blues Festival received a 2-year funding increase. Half was in 2016, and then the remaining amount, 11,779, I believe, was for 2017. That was approved by council.
Okay, so the CEIG unallocated funds, could monies come out of that fund to assist the Social Planning Council, or the Social Development Council? I'm just asking a question.
Councillor Davey?
That's fine. Point of order. The rules are very clear. Rules are rules, Mr. Chair. You cannot permit that question.
I'm asking about a different fund, a different pot.
I'll allow the question, but let's please remain to the topic.
Well, we're talking about community grants. This is community grants.
Okay, but we're talking about taking funds from another organization.
No, it's not an organization anymore.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Fernandez. You want?
I'd like to know if any funding from the CEI unallocated funds could be used towards the social development.
Mr. May.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Right now, the staff recommendation is to transfer those to Tier 2. Council is at liberty to do anything you want with those funds.
Okay, thank you. Then I would like to put a motion forward at the right time.
We'll take your motion after Councillor Marsh's.
Okay. Are we into comments yet?
Go ahead, make your comments.
Well, no, if there's more questions, I'd rather make comments after everybody else has asked questions.
Councillor Etherington?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think this has already been covered. Just putting aside the dollar figures, which I'm a little confused on at the moment, with Councillor Marsh's motion, I do agree that my question was going to be to staff that if we do increase the amount to the museum, which I would support, we would also, in all fairness and equality, also increase it to the art gallery and the symphony. That's not really a question, but that's where I'm coming from.
Councillor Gazzola.
I want to go back to my question of clarification. Are we going to be dealing with motions today? And if we are, I'm not going to partake in it, because the more we talk about this, the more questions that are out there unanswered, and all of a sudden we're dealing with a quick recommendation from a member of council. I don't have problems with it, but we haven't dealt with that. I mean, staff present us with budget papers. They present us with a budget. Today they present us with that section that deals with community grants. Unlike fees where we have to pass them to get them in place in time, we don't have to deal with this. This is all part of the budget process. So there should be no, there are a lot of, I think these are pretty valid questions dealing with this issue that we need to have some time to look at before we jump in to a recommendation today. So we should treat everything the same. Councillor Davey just said the rules are the rules, so let's apply the rules all over. End of story.
Councillor Davey?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I think I can help in this. As per past practice, what we have done is we have made motions here, but in the recommendation, you'll see the first line, I believe it says, any decisions that we make are referred to budget, subject to the final budget day. So in the hopes of speeding up that final budget day, I think what we've done in the past is we've dealt with these issues now and referred them to final budget day, and then so we can change them at that point as well. Doesn't provide a whole lot of security or certainty for the groups, but that has been past practice.
Okay.
Can I respond to that?
Please.
Those are exactly the same issues I've always presented with everything that we deal on budget day. If we deal with it during our preliminary review of it, but for some reason, council has found it prudent not to go in that direction. So you can't suck and blow.
Okay, Councillor Gazzola, do you have any further questions? No further questions. Okay, thank you. Councillor Singh.
Well, to Councillor Gazzola's point, this can be referred to budget. So if the recommendation, I think much of it, when it comes from Tier 1, Tier 2 funding, we seem to deal with within what the funding allows, and that's why we in the past have been able to make decisions on grant application day. But for something like what Councillor Marsh is recommending, especially if there's no funding source that's being outlined, and you're saying it has an impact to the tax base, then I think it would be more prudent to refer it to budget, but based on the recommendation you have, rather than taking the vote today. That's the only comment, unless you want to elaborate more as to your funding source.
Okay. Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
I was going to go to that point too. I did have a question of staff though. Just having been chair of Community Infrastructure Services a few times, I think part of the reason we deal with it today and try to put recommendations on the floor is because the delegations are here and therefore they don't have to come back on final budget day in case we have any questions. So there's the ability to have that dialogue and kind of move forward with it. I do and have heard what you've been saying, Councillor Griswold. I'm just trying to, from my past experience. I was wondering, so I kind of already hit on the point with regards to the museum, that back in 2010 they didn't have any funding, and then they got $120,000 annually. The same is for the art gallery and the symphony. They both got $40,000 from the Arts Sustainability Fund, but that's only a portion of what they already receive, right? Like the art gallery receives over $300,000 and the symphony receives over $240,000, according to these numbers, probably not 2010 numbers. I'm wondering if we can get the information for final budget day, the pre-art sustainability fund, because if we're going to compare them to the 9.89% that everyone else got, if in 2010 they got a 50% increase, we need to understand that too and put it in context. So I think we need to ask for that information of what their pre-art sustainability fund numbers were, and what their numbers are now, and then we can compare them to the numbers that are being put in front of us, and then be able to make that decision with that context on final budget day, because I don't think anybody has those numbers in front of them today. So I'm just asking staff if they can do that. I guess that's the question.
Okay, and the response is yes.
Okay.
Councillor Davey.
Okay. Thank you. There's a lot of history here in terms of this funding. I think we need to be clear on. My first question is, when did the art sustainability funding become included in Tier 1?
Ms. Wilms?
Through the chair, this 2017 is the first time we merged the two together. So the increases will show in this report.
Okay. When this funding came under the CEI initiative, and I wish Mr. Farwell, frankly, was here to answer this question, this was all brand new funding on top of, except with the exception of the museum, we didn't get any. This was all brand new funding on top of current Tier 1 grants. My understanding was, and maybe Mr. Wilmer can help out here, this funding wasn't necessarily to be counted on. It was to be passed off to CEI to deal with as they saw fit. That was the initial plan, correct?
Mr. Wilmer?
Through the chair, no, I don't think that is correct. This was the amount that was recommended to be granted directly to these cornerstone organizations from the municipalities. It didn't flow through CEI.
Okay, that wasn't my recollection, but CEI was never supposed to take ownership of these funds, ever. Then why wouldn't they have been included from Tier 1 at the beginning? That's my recollection, but...
So through the chair, there was discussion over the years as to whether each of the municipalities might take its sustainability funding, flow it through CEI to grant to those organizations, but none of the municipalities ever agreed to do that. We all preferred to continue to flow the grants directly to the organizations, not through CEI.
Okay, but was there always a clear intention that once they got this money, it was there forever?
Through the chair, no. There's been no commitment of long-term continuation of this.
Okay.
I think this transition to Tier 1 would certainly be a step towards that.
Okay. So just in the interest of time, Mr. Chair, can I comment very briefly?
Sure.
So I want to be clear. When it comes to final budget day or the vote now, I think the museum should get some extra dollars, and I absolutely think we need to do it in a revenue-neutral fashion. So I think a fund, an amount similar to this to the museum specifically, of around $10,000 from the additional funding in CEI is something I would support. As for the rest of what's going on here, I think it's, frankly, I think it's inappropriate that we backdate Tier 1 funding to something that wasn't Tier 1 source of funding in the first place. This was all new money that these organizations received. So to suddenly count, like we are transferring to Tier 1 because it's the most clear method on a go-forward basis, but to retroactively add these funds to something that was new money, I think is something I frankly can't support.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Yaneski.
Yeah, I wish to declare a conflict of interest in regard to the Kitchener-Waterloo Community Orchestra. That's one of the organizations as part of the funding. They're not asking for any money this year. They're just requested just to remain at zero. But since I'm still a member of that, we should declare a conflict.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fernandez.
I have a point of clarification to ask Councillor Davey. So are you suggesting that the motion that's before us from Councillor Marsh, which is talking about taking the monies from the tax base, you're suggesting that the leftover funds from the CEI be used towards an additional funding for the museum as sort of a catch-up? Is that what you're thinking?
Right. So my personal preference, and obviously it's the will of committee, would be that we deal with the museum only today. Because since CEI is being transferred into Tier 1, on a go-forward basis, all of these amounts will be subject to the same inflationary increases that we see in Tier 1 on a go-forward basis. I don't think it's appropriate to think that we need to somehow top it up retroactively because it was never part of Tier 1. So my personal preference would be that we deal with the museum funding amount, keep it simple. And again, I think the $10,000 seems appropriate. We're right around that mark. And my personal preference would be that come from the CEI funding. The additional funding we'll be dealing with on final budget day. I think that's a clear way to deal with it that doesn't impact the tax base at all.
Okay, and you're going exactly where I was going to go had had Councillor Marsh not put forward her motion. Can I put forward my motion now on the other item that I was discussing?
What other item are you?
Funding for the Social Development Council out of the CEI unallocated funds.
Okay. Can I ask a question to the clerk, please, or Mr. Warmer? Do you want
to? Through the chair, just a suggestion procedurally, because we had three delegations speaking on three items, it might be clearer if committee dealt with those three items first, if it wishes to deal with them at all, before you start to deal with the other items. And the clerk could probably confirm, but once there's a motion on the floor, discussion should be focused on that motion.
Makes sense. We'll get back to you on that one.
Okay.
Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Chair Anitis. So, I'm happy to withdraw this motion at this time because I hear from council, from this committee, that it needs further refining, and I do want to comment that I feel it's very counterproductive to go back 7 years ago to look at funding amounts and try and justify increases or decreases based on that. The only reason that I added this motion at all was to make it fair for the museum to get an increase at the same time as the other organizations that were in a similar boat. But I'm happy to withdraw it and bring forward a motion that I can circulate to council previous to budget day. And also I think that as part of our reflection on this topic, we should look at the wording of the Arts Sustainability Fund recommendations, because certainly they wouldn't have said, well, this is just extra money, for fun, and then let's just withdraw it at some arbitrary date down the road. It was to make sure that these organizations could become stable, and with the cost of inflation each year increasing, I think it would only stand a reason to increase them, appropriately, rather than to just say, well, that was extra money for a few years. Let's I think that's a dangerous concept to look at. But again, I'll withdraw the motion at this time.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Gazzola?
I really don't have to speak, I guess, now, because I was going to, if that motion was on the table, I wasn't sure it was, I was going to move for a deferral. So it's not there, I don't have to move for a deferral. I will move for a deferral if there are any other motions come forward.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Galloway-Seelock?
I was going to move that deferral too, but I still want that information present because it sounds like we're going to have that discussion on final budget day. So if we can still have that, the funding that those three institutions had from 2010, I don't see it as counterproductive. They got a substantial increase. That $200,000 that's represented by the 120 and the 240,000s were the $1 per capita. That was an increase. The other $30,000 at the time was given to the CEI organization so that they could grant the money out. And then we gave them another $56,000 so that they could actually operate. Okay, CEI is done. We have that $40,000 now because it's been increased over the 7 years. So all of that money, that $200,000 was new money, and that's fine. I don't want to take that away from the cultural institutions. That is not my intent. My intent is just to show if we gave a 10% increase to every other organization from 2010 to 2016, some of these organizations will have gotten a lot more than that. They will have gotten more than 10% increase. For example, the art gallery will have, they will have gotten that 9.89% increase on the other $275,000 that they receive, as would the symphony, right? So I don't think we can draw those numbers, and I don't see it as counterproductive to look. I think we need to understand if we're going to increase the museum's grant ask, that we understand what their funding levels were back then so that we know what we've already given them moving forward. And I'm not suggesting that we don't. I just think it's important to have that information.
Okay, so are you asking to give direction in particular for staff to look at funding for, in particular, just to the museum to provide ways?
No, I'm not asking for that.
Okay, because right now I have nothing on the floor.
Okay.
So
I'm just asking for the information that I had asked for previously on the three, for the art sustainability funding, those three organizations, the museum, the symphony, and the art gallery, what their 2010 levels were at that time, and what they are obviously going to be moving forward.
So staff indicates they're going to bring that forward. Okay. And your topic, okay, well, what happened is, okay, what happened is this committee deemed the item that you were here to speak on as not an item that is to be considered because it's been deemed as already been dealt with in the past.
Submission to hand out, which is longer, and so I would like to be given 4 minutes to speak.
I'll take the will of this committee. Does this committee want to hear the?
So I move that the delegate be heard, but no questions be asked, because again, this is not on the agenda and it's already been dealt with. But it's appropriate if they are in audience and they want to speak, and allow the committee to hear what they have to say. But to save time, and of course we have a really busy day, it would be appropriate for timing and of course our schedule that we don't get bogged down in questions.
Okay. Well, I'm going to take I want to take a vote on that, because as you said, we do have a busy day, and we did vote on earlier not to discuss this item. All those in favor to hear the delegation? Okay. You have 4 minutes, sir. Come on down. There won't be, no questions will be asked of the delegation from committee.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Bill Leondes, Councillor
Welcome.
Galloway, councillors. I know the mayor has chosen not to be present today, and 2 other councillors have chosen not to be present today for our Committee Services and Infrastructure Committee. Thank you for staff and any public that are watching on cable TV this morning. My name is Myron Steinman. I have been a volunteer with the Social Development Center for 6 or 7 years. I speak to you this morning as an individual, although I have been a member of the board for about 6 months. Has my written submission been handed out? Yes. I'm going to be roughly following that format, but I have reduced it with my wife at 4 minutes this morning at a coffee. I am requesting the City of Kitchener reinstate Tier 1 funding. This would be money well spent by the City of Kitchener and be a model for other municipalities and the province to partner with non-governmental public engagement organizations. How I have been involved with the Social Development Center. Social Development Center has provided me with a place where I can be involved with social justice type issues, working with people with lived experience with trauma. I am employed part-time with a community mental health organization, but appreciate the opportunity to take part in a cross-disability group that aims to address social justice type issues, social issues that I feel are important. My involvement with the Social Development Center has exposed me to political policy and political policy development. I have been able to utilize my knowledge and lived experience and develop leadership skills. More specifically, Social Development Center has helped me increase my knowledge with how to think critically and how to learn about policy issues from the perspective of persons. I maintain a focus on the City of Kitchener because that is where I call my neighborhood and home. Social Development Center has helped me develop my listening skills. We strive to treat everyone with dignity and respect. We strive to progress at a pace that is comfortable for everyone. We strive to ensure everyone has a voice and a place to belong. Well, believe me, that could be a challenge. Some people want to move fast and some people want to move slow, and some people have to move slow. If Social Development Center would not exist, I would feel sad and perhaps angry. People come to the Social Development Center for help to organize, to find a place to voice their concerns, and to be part of groups like the Disability and Human Rights Group, the Poverty-Free KW Action Group, and other focus groups facilitated through Social Development Center. In 2015, we held kitchen table talks of what makes for a good neighborhood and what makes for a decent life. We continue to have other community forums focusing on poverty issues and other issues of concern, like the focus group we're going to have on the basic income that's coming up prior to the province's basic income one in January. In this process of all this stuff, civil society is built. A civil society that is built on respect and trust is a prerequisite for a healthy democracy. Non-government engagement organizations like the Social Development Center have an important role to play in building a climate for civil society to flourish. The Social Development Center has been a valued partner with the City of Kitchener for many long years, perhaps even before the region of Waterloo was incorporated. To repeat, I am requesting the City reinstate Tier 1 funding for the Social Development Center, Waterloo Region. This money would be well spent by the City of Kitchener and would be a model for other municipalities to invest in Tier 1 funding for non-government public engagement organizations. At this time, we have 3 staff that are working very hard on $10,000 of funding. And we are located at the Trinity United Church Annex. We had never received funding for space from the city. So thank you for listening to my concerns. Like I said, you don't want to answer any of my questions at this time, but I have made a written submission, and I'd be willing to answer any questions at a later time if you would like to have that. And I'd ask you to reconsider. Tier 1 funding is important for organizations who deal with the public who don't have any funds. Tier 1 funding is needed for organizations. That is Tier 1 funding. You know what Tier 1 funding is? It's ongoing operating costs. And we serve a population that doesn't have any money to pay for our services. So I am asking you to think about reinstating Tier 1 funding. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Stein. Councillor Fernandez, are you going to put forward your recommendation?
Yeah. So my motion, subject to final budget day, is that 10,000 from the unallocated leftover funds from CEI of 44,000 be moved to Social Development Centre to support their ongoing work. So that's a $10,000 grant that I'm asking for. I recognize that once the CEI funds are depleted, there will not be any further ongoing funds, but then we can address the deficit for this social development center in 2017 or 2017.
Okay, so I do have a question to the clerk. Considering we put forward that there is no reconsideration, can you give me a little bit of advice on whether or not this motion is acceptable or?
Through the chair. As this funding currently that would be provided to them will be through a Tier 1 grant, and a motion was just recently defeated on reconsidering providing them with funding through a Tier 1 grant. Therefore, that motion would not be acceptable.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Okay, just a quick comment. One of the hardest things I have to do when I sit in these chairs is listen to people who do wonderful work around our community. Trying to eke out a special interest to help, whether it's a cultural organization or a social organization or other organizations, to squeak out 1% to increase the work that they're doing and to turn some of that down is extremely emotionally challenging for me, and I think that I know that many organizations come forward for Tier 2 grants. Sometimes they come with some very unusual requests, but I think the base funding that we have here for the Tier 1 grants is really important and critical to ongoing diversity within our community. My hope is that next year that we can see our way clear to funding some of the organizations that have been the foundation of this community and have done incredible work over the last number of years.
Thank you. Right now, there is a recommendation. I don't have anyone who's moving the recommendation. You'll move it? Okay. Councillor Singh? Okay. We'll move, the recommendation's moved with requesting that information that staff will provide on the turn of funding. So with that, I'll make my final comments. Basically, it's never an easy decision to provide funding for organizations. Every single organization that we deal with does great service to the community and adds value. But it is up to this committee and council to set those priorities that they feel, in particular, as a whole grand picture. And it is difficult to make those tough decisions. And Councillor Gazzola? Okay. All right, so you have a question before we make the motion, because I'm going to call the... Okay, so all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, thank you. So that concludes the first part of Community Services and Infrastructure Service Committee. We have 8 minutes.